Action! Cut. Just move quickly over to the other place. All right, sir. When we say go, you just examine your dahlia and go right on up and back into the house.
Okay.
Action. Examine your dahlia here. Look at your dahlia.
Oh, I'm gonna pull it.
Okay.
Going on some of the labels and stuff.
Action. Just open the door and close it.
Do it once more.
Okay, one more. And after you close the door this time, then go on back into the house.
Okay.
Okay, anytime.
Okay?
Okay.
You first started in the mills.
I believe it was in around September of 1933. It might have been in August, but I believe it was in September, first part of September of 33, when I went to work in the textile mill. My brother went to work there before I did. He's dead now. My other brother, younger than me.
Stop it just a moment. I want you to start over again. And
1 second. Okay.
I went to work, I believe it was, in early part of September of 33. It could have been the last part of August. And my brother asked me to come over there that they had opening, and I went over there and got a job.
what was it like in the mills?
Hot, like on the desert.
Just to start, you got to get my question in your answer. The mills were hot.
The mill was hot as it could be. There was no air conditioning and nothing like that. Lint flying all over, and you couldn't hardly breathe and get your breath. And as things went along, the company added more work to us, and I, being one of the best educated persons in my department, they elected me shop steward and then shop committeeman, and then we had an election. We lost it because we didn't take in the colored people. The company told the colored people, see, they won't let you sign a union card. If the union comes in, all you colored people are going to lose your job. We had the election, lost it. There's 120, 25 colored people, solid votes against us. So we lost the election. That was UTW AFL, UTW AFL. And Joe Jacobs was our representative. He wasn't a state director. He just worked part-time. He's an attorney, too, going to law school or just getting his law degree.
Now, what did the colored do in the mills at that time?
They did all the nasty and hard labor work, unloading the trucks, cleaning out the restrooms, sweeping the floors, blowing off. Everything was nasty and dirty that the white people wouldn't want or didn't want. They gave it to the colored people, and it was the lowest paying job there was.
What was the pay?
15 cents an hour.
No. Start when you want to say that the pay was 15 cents an hour. Okay.
The pay was 15 cents an hour for 40% of the jobs in the plant. That's 15 cents an hour. The doffers got more than that. The weavers got more than that. The loom fixers got more than that. The skilled labor that took to, but people out on the street sweeping floors, blowing off, and all in and so forth got 15 cents an hour. $1.20 a day, $6 for 5 days work, 40 hours. No time and half time, no double time, no benefits whatsoever. And they wanted to that you had to come to work every day, and if they worked you, they worked you. They sent you home, and you got no reporting pay.
When did you first start forming a union?
They was already forming the union when I went there in '33. Joe Jacobs was already contacted, and some of them had done signed cards when I went to work there in '33. But they hadn't had an election. They was forming an organizing committee to see if they could get enough people to sign cards to get an election. And they didn't give any of the colored people cards at all. And so you had a director of the company come out and said, see, they don't even ask you to sign because we're going to fire you if the union comes in.
Now, what happened when the NRA came in?
When the NRA come in, the company says, we're going to have to close up, we're going to have to abolish half your job, you're going to have to do twice as much work because you went from 15 cents an hour to 33 1/3 cents an hour. They call it the Blue Eagle, the NRA under Roosevelt. And they finally, later on, a year or so later, it was ruled illegal. But we got paid for it, and we sure appreciated going from $6 to $13.20.
Well, then, if you went from $6 to $13.20, why the big strike of '34?
Well, the NRA was ruled illegal, and the company, we struck in '34 because of the, not because of the NRA, but because a lot of the companies doubled up your work, and you had to do 2 jobs for one, and you didn't get regular work. They'd work you Monday, lay you off Tuesday, make you report 3 days a week, and only get 6 days a week. You get 3 days work, and you couldn't make a decent living just working 3 days a week. And sometimes you didn't even get but 2 days or 1 day a week.
Could you describe the stretch out, using that term, the stretch out?
Well, they'd come in, I'll use the weave room for one instance, where you was running 2 hand looms and throwing it back and forth. They put you on 4 hand looms, where you had to walk out here and then run them 2 over there and these 2, and you're running 4 instead of 2. In other words, you double your workload. You had no time to rest, go to the restroom, eat, get a drink of water, nothing. And you couldn't even keep 3 going, less 4.
In the previous tapes, you described the restrooms. Could you do that again?
Well, the restrooms, the men's was here and the ladies was right next to it, and it had an awful odor, and it was filthy and always wet with somebody urinating on the floor or something, and they'd mop them up, and you didn't watch it careful, you'd slip and break your neck. The floor was slicky, you had rubber shoes on or something. The kind of concrete floor, slick concrete floor, and they get wet, they was real slippy, and they stunk, just like a dead cat or dog.
Now, could you tell us about the strike of '34?
Well, the strike of '34 was called, I forgot what day, it's been so long ago, but anyhow, it was called, and we had what we had runners out to tell them when to shut down at different times, because we didn't have time at one time. And we shut down like in Newnan, Georgia, and Atlanta, tried to shut down at the same time, and then we went to Columbus, Georgia, West Point, Georgia, and Egan cotton mills, and Fulton Bag cotton mills, and Exposition Cotton Mills, Hampton Mills in Hampton, Georgia, and we had to pass word around. And very few of us had automobiles back in those days.
Now, you're talking about the flying squadrons, are you?
Yes, sir.
Could you, using that term, the flying squadrons, what do you think about it?
Well, the flying squadron was the one that carried the message and give support where it's needed. The flying squadron was the person who had a car, and he would carry where the picket line was weak or needed some help. He'd carry a load of men there to help support the picket line or help the ladies where they had ladies fill in on the picket line and pass the word on in different mills. The flying squadron was called flying squadron because it stayed on the go 24 hours a day.
Could you talk about the role of women in the strike?
Well, the women was just as good as the men. The women was solid as the men was because the company had mistreated the ladies worse than they had the men, because they made some of the ladies quit nursing the children and come back to work earlier. They'd lose the job or have to move out of Mill Village.
Could you talk about the Mill Village and evictions?
Well, the Mill Village was right at work. If you lived in the Mill Village, you got cheap rent. Mill rented houses cheaper, and it kept the best help. It gave the best help to the people who lived in the Mill Village because they wanted them to stay there. And it was cheaper rent, and the lights, water. Some of them had lights, some had water, and some of them had a well out the back, and 8 houses would use the same well. And some of them had a running faucet on the back porch, and when it froze, it freeze up, and they couldn't have any running water, and it'd break. And it was just awful. No inside plumbing, no inside water. Nobody had water in the house. The water was out the well, and the well was behind 4 houses on one street and 4 the other. One well for 8 houses. Or some of them had running water in the water faucet, like you put a hose on the back porch, and they had to go out on the back porch when they wanted a drink of water, or wanted water to boil or something.
Now, when people struck, did the company evict them from the houses? Could you talk about that?
The company did everything it could. It gave them notice that people that struck, majority of them that struck, did not live in company houses. They lived outside the company houses. And few of them, not over 50% of them that lived in company houses, struck. We call them scabs. And they went and got their brothers and sisters and lived out on the farm and brought them in to make like they were producing. They wasn't producing a damn thing. They didn't know a warp from a loom, I forget different names. Jacquard loom, draper loom, carding machine, anything like that. They just come in and stood around and watch what one of the men, he had 2 or 3 helpers that was hired to come in as scabs to make people think they was producing. And they wasn't making any production at all.
Now, could you talk about what it was like during the first years of the Depression?
You talking about 29?
Yeah, 29 and all that. 29, 30, 31.
Well, when the Depression hit, we had a boom. Everything was booming, and everybody was working up until we had the Depression in 29, and the bottom fell out in Florida, and then it spread all over the United States. And when it spread, everybody had men, grown men, women, and children on the streets selling pencils and apples. And you could see that apple, red delicious apple, and them yellow delicious apple. You could hold it up like a mirror, shine so, and see yourself, picture in that apple. And they sell them, and nobody had a job. And the farmers, I think, was only paying $5 a month for a month's wages and board. $5 a month to a farmer.
Could you talk about the Klan? And I want to make sure you look right into the camera now. I wanted to talk about the Klan and the Union and the strike.
Well, the Klan was supported by the company because nearly all the bosses and second hands belonged to the Ku Klux Klan and did what the company wanted them to. And the Klan was for the company and against the Union. And they threatened a lot of the Union people and Union people and protected the scabs and took up for them. And the Klan, and later on we had the black shirts.
What were the black shirts?
The communists.
The black shirts. What were the black shirts?
The communists. That was the communists. That we were fixing to have a rebellion here in the United States. In other words, they was more for the Union. The black shirts was for the Union, and the Klan was against the Union.
I see.
The black shirts was against the company and more for the Union. Yeah. They wanted to help themselves. In other words, they believed the man should be equal and have equal day pay and equal day living.
Okay. Could you describe the way the National Guard worked around a strike?
Well, the National Guard, I had two brothers that worked in the mill, one older than me, one younger than me, and they went to work in the mill before I did, and they was in the National Guard. And I wasn't in the National Guard because I had paper routes, and I was delivering newspapers when I went to work there, and I kept delivering newspapers. I was on the first shift, went to work at 7 till 3, and got off and delivered newspapers from 3:30 to 6:30. And I wore out 4 bicycles and 4 automobiles delivering newspapers. And so I wasn't in the National Guard, but my brothers was, and they was out on strike, and the National Guard, Gene Talmadge, called out the National Guards, took my two brothers off the picket line, sent one down to West Point, one down to LaGrange, Georgia, and one of them was in the outfit down there where they had a fellow got scared, and they all had the bayonets on the rifles, and they had the rifles loaded with bayonets on it. And one of them stabbed one of the scabs down there because he couldn't bulldoze him around, make him do what he wanted to, and so he stabbed him with a bayonet and cut him and killed him.
Why was it so bad to have the National Guards out during a strike?
Well, because the National Guards is like a militia, like the Army, like the police, military police. In other words, you better obey them or they could put you in jail or put you in a concentration camp. Out here at Fort McPherson, they had a concentration camp out there at the old target range. And they had barbed wire fence and pup tent. And they had men, women, and children living in pup tents on the ground and fed them rations. In other words, hardtack and stuff of World War I rations.
Did you see any of that yourself at Fort McPherson?
I sure did.
Could you tell us about it?
Well, I just got through telling you that they had hardtack that was in a brown tin can, sealed. And you had to wind it like opening up a can of sardines or a can of Viennas. And you open it up and it wasn't nothing but a soda cracker made of water, flour and water. They call it hardtack. And it's left over from World War I. And this was in 1934. And some of it had bugs in it.
What did the women think of being out there in the camp?
They were ashamed of themselves and didn't think an American citizen would ever be treated like that. In particular, a mother nursing a baby out there sleeping in the cold on the ground, and sometimes we didn't even have a blanket or sheet to cover up with.
Now, we have some newsreel footage that makes it look like it was a summer camp with the girls treated nicely and being fed by the soldiers and so forth.
Oh, I never saw any of that. I don't know where they had that at. They didn't have that here at Fort McPherson or down at LaGrange or down at Columbus, Georgia. They might have had it at they could have had it at Noonan, that is a textile town, and got more millionaires for the size of the town than any other town in the United States, textile millionaires.
Now, tell us about where your mill was and what happened exactly in your mill during the strike.
Well, my mill is a combination of a woolen mill. Name of it is Atlanta Woolen Mill. But it was half cotton that made cotton merchandise in one section and wool in the other. And I worked in the wool division because it paid more than cotton. And I was out looking out for Lloyd to make a living and feed my wife and kids. And that's when I worked in the mill and carried newspapers, and then when I got married, I gave up my newspaper route and started working in clothing stores and grocery stores on Wednesdays, Thursdays, Fridays, Saturdays, and making extra money.
Now, when you went on strike out at the woolen mill, were there local merchants who helped to feed the strikers?
No, we couldn't even run a damn empty school building or empty store. We had to meet in the woods, what they call the Ferguson Woods, the big woods. They got a park here at Ferguson Park. Old man Ferguson died, and he gave that land to the city, and it connected up to the Atlanta woolen mill, and it's known as the Ferguson Park. And it was given to the city by Mr. Ferguson, and he was friendly to us, but he didn't give us no food or nothing. And all the merchants was against us, told us we ought to go back to work and we wouldn't need no food.
Could you talk about the company commissary?
Well, one week,
No, just say, well, the company had a commissary.
the company had a company store, a commissary, and it had a lunch track that went through the mill. And you bought bugaloos, they called it. They signed up and buy $1 worth of coins, nickels, and it was little size, about the size of a nickel, and it was alloyed. And you did that at the lunch stand and bought your money, and they took it out payday, and you would go down to the grocery store and buy your groceries and take it home, and payday come, you didn't have a payday. Many times I've seen them go down there, and they owed money at the end of the week. Instead of drawing money, they had nothing to buy anything with, and they had to keep, the company kept them in debt where they buy there, because pet milk was 10 cents at A&P and Colonial stores, and it was 20 cents at the commissary. They charged double price for everything because you charged it, and that kept you in debt. Well, you couldn't leave the mill and didn't have money to start on your own.
Talk about Talmadge, Gene Talmadge.
Well, Gene Talmadge was a great farmer man. He took up for the farmers, and we had the county unit system. And these little towns had 2 units, and Fulton County only had 6, but we had 600 times the population of a little town, and we only had 6 votes. So he lost Fulton County. He never did carry Fulton County, city of Atlanta, Talmadge did. But he won on the county unit vote, 159 county units.
Now, it's said that Gene Talmadge swore he wouldn't call out the National Guard. As soon as he won the primary, he did call it out. Could you tell that story?
Well, I'm not too familiar with that story. I heard the story through mouth. And my daddy told me never believe only half of what you read and nothing you hear. And so I don't know about that.
Fine, thank you. Okay, could you talk about why Gorman called off the strike?
Well, to best of my knowledge, I wasn't one of the state directors or international representatives. I was just a volunteer and a striker. And the reason I understand he called out because the people were starving to death and we wasn't making any money and they get no help. Nobody would give us anything. They was against us because we were strikers.
Want to read that?
Yeah. Okay. You gonna change tape?
I'm getting an indicator. I don't know if...
Yeah.
Okay, rolling.
Okay, could you tell me a little more about what happened when the strike got called off?
Well, we was blacklisted. And everyone that was out on strike, the company, sent their name to every other company. And you could go one and ask for a job, and they'd have ads wanting somebody to work, skilled loom fixer, skilled weaver, skilled dolpher, or so forth. And you go there, where are you from? And you tell them Atlanta woolen mill, a Egan cotton mill, a Fulton bag, a exposition. They said, let me look up. And they'd look, and you just came out on strike. We don't hire strikers. You was blacklisted.
Now, what happened to you personally?
I was blacklisted.
Just say that's what...
I was blacklisted and then went back to work, and we ain't got any work for you, Mr. Gossett. So I was kind of glad of it because I went downtown, Ladies 5th Avenue shoe shop, and began to sell women's shoes and put up stock on Wednesday and sell women's shoes on Friday evening and all day Saturday. And made as much doing that as I did at the mill for all week.
Okay. Could you talk about Roosevelt's role in all of this?
Well, I tell you, Roosevelt to me is one of the best presidents we've ever had, because he was a rich man and his wife was rich and all, but he did more for the working people and the underprivileged people than anybody had ever done up to that time.
Did you ever write a letter to him?
I wrote many letters to him, and I went swimming.
I wrote many a letter to Roosevelt.
I wrote many letters to President Roosevelt, and I also went swimming in Warm Springs when he drove that A model down there and went down there for his infantile paralysis. I went swimming with him.
Rolling again?
Just a moment.
Was there a light on that wasn't on before? Or
Nope.
No, it's
Everything's fine.
Jamie, should I have him smoking now?
If you, I don't think so, not for continuity.
I would think not.
There we go.
So, could you duck your cigarette? Thank you. It's just that, yeah, thank you.
And we're rolling.
Okay, now, do you remember, could you tell us about writing Roosevelt and Mrs. Roosevelt?
Well, I didn't write Ms. Roosevelt. I wrote Mr. Roosevelt as he was president. And
Again, talk to Cam.
and
Let's start again. I didn't write.
I did not write Ms. Roosevelt. I wrote Mr. Roosevelt. Well, it was President Roosevelt, not Mr. but President Roosevelt. And I got a reply from his secretary, and said if there's any further information, I forgot what the matter was now, but to give her further details, and she'd be glad to check into it.
Did you know anybody else who wrote to the Roosevelts?
Oh yes, there's a lot of us strikers. A lot of the people in the textile mill at that time hadn't gone no further than the second and fourth grade and couldn't write and read. And so a lot of them couldn't write. But us crew leaders of the flying squadron and we wrote, but that was only about 10%.
Do you remember any of the other letters? What did they say?
Well, they requested Roosevelt to pass a wage and hour law, and they asked him to pass a health law and welfare benefits and housing and the things that we there need real bad, because the company didn't have enough houses to furnish all its employees, and the employees had to travel from out in the farms and all to the city, and they had to pay room and board, and then at the end of the week they had nothing to take home to the family.
Could you go back and talk about Gorman? Did you ever meet him? What do you think of his leadership, so forth?
Well, I liked Gorman, but I didn't like him as much as Roosevelt. And Gorman was a good man, but he's just a man that his personality and mind didn't gee all together.
Did you ever meet him?
Yes,
Or
I've shook hands with him.
just start saying, talk about Gorman, I shook hands with him, and so forth and so on.
Well, Gorman came to one of the general meetings.
I'm sorry. You have to wait till the bus passes. Sorry to do this to you, but it's such a beautiful story. It's so important for us to get. Okay.
Hold up. Let's just slap a new tape in.
Gorman-
Tape in.